Sarah's hands trembled as she smoothed down her vintage dress, the one she'd spent 3 hours picking out for tonight. Through the rain-streaked window of her apartment, she watched Marcus pull up in an older Honda Civic, its paint faded but clean. Her roommate Jenna appeared behind her, eyebrows raised in that judgmental way that made Sarah's stomach clench. "That's his car?" Jenna asked, not bothering to hide her disappointment. "Girl, you met him at that charity gala. I thought he was, successful." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. Yes, Marcus had looked polished at the fundraiser where they'd met 2 weeks ago, his suit impeccable, his conversation intelligent and warm. But she hadn't fallen for a suit. She'd fallen for the way he'd spent 20 minutes talking to the elderly volunteer everyone else had ignored, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the genuine interest he'd shown when she talked about her work at the youth center. "I don't care about his car, Jen," Sarah said quietly, grabbing her purse. "Well, you should care about where he takes you," Jenna called after her. "A guy's first date choice tells you everything you need to know about how he values you." Those words echoed in Sarah's mind as she slid into Marcus's passenger seat, greeting him with what she hoped was a confident smile. He looked nervous, she noticed, his fingers drumming slightly on the steering wheel. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her earlier anxiety dissolve a little. They drove through the upscale part of town, past the trendy restaurants where Sarah had imagined they might go, past the romantic bistros with their candlelit windows. When Marcus finally pulled into a parking lot, Sarah's heart sank. Danny's Diner stood before them, its neon sign flickering, its exterior weathered and outdated. This wasn't even a charming retro diner. This was just cheap. She saw Marcus watching her reaction and forced brightness into her voice. "I love diners," she lied. Inside, the vinyl booths were patched with duct tape, and the laminate tables were scratched from decades of use. A tired-looking waitress with graying hair approached them, her name tag reading, Betty. But when she saw Marcus, her entire face transformed. "Marcus. Honey, it's been 2 weeks. I was starting to worry," Betty exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that Marcus returned with equal warmth. "I've been swamped with work, Betty. But I couldn't stay away from your coffee much longer," Marcus grinned. He gestured to Sarah. "This is Sarah. Sarah, this is Betty. She makes the best apple pie in the state." Betty's eyes twinkled as she looked between them. "First date. Oh, he's a keeper, honey. Trust me." Before Sarah could respond, Betty hurried off, calling over her shoulder, "The usual, Marcus." Sarah studied Marcus across the chipped table, confusion replacing her disappointment. There was clearly a story here. "I know this isn't what you expected," Marcus started, his voice apologetic but firm. "And I promise, I can afford a nicer place. But I needed to bring you here first because this place, it's important to me. These people are important to me." Over the next hour, Sarah watched something extraordinary unfold. Marcus knew everyone. The cook, Jimmy, came out to fist bump him and share a joke. A single mother in the corner booth waved gratefully, and Marcus later explained he'd helped her son get a scholarship. An elderly man eating alone smiled when Marcus stopped by his table to chat about his grandson's baseball game. But it was what happened next that changed everything. A young woman stumbled in, her clothes soaked from the rain, a little girl of about 5 clutching her hand. The child's shoes were too small, worn through at the toes. Betty moved to intercept them with a gentle but firm expression. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the young mother's face crumble with embarrassment as she clearly explained she couldn't pay. Before Betty could respond, Marcus was on his feet. Sarah watched as he approached quietly, kneeling down to the little girl's level. "Hey there," he said softly. "Is it your birthday?" The little girl shook her head, confused. "Well, that's funny, because we ordered way too much food for just 2 people, and it's already paid for," Marcus continued, his voice kind but matter-of-fact, preserving the mother's dignity. "We'd hate to waste it. Would you and your mom be willing to help us out?" The mother's eyes filled with tears. She started to protest, but Marcus stood and looked at her directly. "My mom and I lived in our car for 6 months when I was 7, he said quietly. "A stranger bought us dinner at a place just like this. Changed our whole night. Maybe our whole life. Please, let us pass it forward." Sarah felt her throat tighten as the mother nodded, unable to speak. Betty was already moving, setting up a booth, bringing out plates of warm food. Marcus returned to Sarah, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry. I know this is weird for a first date. Marcus, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Why did you really bring me here? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the old table. After we met at the gala, I looked you up. I saw all the work you do with underprivileged kids, the hours you volunteer, the way you actually care. And I thought, if this is going somewhere, I need her to see this side of my life first. Because I come here twice a week. I have since I got my first real paycheck 5 years ago. I eat here, I tip well, and I help when I can. Betty gave my mom free meals when we had nothing. This diner was our safe place. He looked up at her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. My company is doing well now. I have a nice apartment, a decent savings account. But I'll never forget what it felt like to be that kid with worn-out shoes, watching my mom count change, hoping we'd have enough for one meal to split. So yeah, I could have taken you to that French place downtown. But I needed you to know that this is who I am. And if that's not what you're looking for, I'd rather know now. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Tears were streaming down her face, and she didn't care. Marcus, this is the most incredible first date I've ever been on. His expression shifted from anxiety to hope. Really? My roommate told me that a guy's first date choice tells you everything about how he values things, Sarah said, glancing at the young mother feeding her daughter, at Betty refilling coffee with a smile, at this worn, beautiful place full of kindness. She was right, just not in the way she thought. Betty arrived with 2 slices of apple pie, each topped with vanilla ice cream. On the house, for the new couple, she winked. I've got a good feeling about you too. As they shared the pie, Marcus told her about his childhood, about his mother who'd worked 3 jobs and still found time to read to him every night, about the scholarship that changed his trajectory, about his company that now hired people who others overlooked, gave second chances to those who needed them. Sarah shared her own story, about growing up with privilege but feeling empty until she started volunteering, about the kids at the youth center who'd taught her what really mattered, about her dream of opening a community center that provided free meals and resources. I'm going to help you do that, Marcus said suddenly. The community center. I mean, if you want help. 3 years later, Sarah stood in that same diner, now holding Marcus's hand in a different way, a simple engagement ring catching the light. They'd just come from the grand opening of Hope Community Center, a place that provided free meals, tutoring, job training, and support services. Betty had been their first official volunteer. Remember our first date? Sarah asked, squeezing his hand. Marcus laughed. When I took you to the cheapest place in town and you somehow fell for me anyway. When you took me to the richest place in town, Sarah corrected him, and showed me what real wealth looks like. Betty approached with 2 slices of apple pie, a tradition now. Still on the house, she insisted, like she always did, even though they'd tried countless times to pay. As Sarah took a bite of that familiar pie, she thought about Jenna's words from 3 years ago. Her old roommate had been right. A first date really does tell you everything you need to know. Just not about expensive restaurants or fancy cars. It tells you about character, about values, about the kind of person someone is when no one important is watching, except Marcus had shown her that everyone is important, that every person deserves kindness, that true love isn't shown through expensive gestures but through consistent, quiet acts of humanity. That cheap diner had given her everything. It had given her Marcus, yes, but more than that, it had given her a new understanding of what mattered. And as she looked around at the patched vinyl booths and the flickering neon sign, Sarah knew she'd never been anywhere more beautiful in her life.